The ground let out a low, violent roar, like something ancient, something buried too long. Then the tower began to tremble, first subtly, like a breath held too long. Then violently, as if the whole building had come alive, shaking itself apart. "Camilla! Don't follow us! No one has time to come back for you!" Someone shouted over their shoulder, panic cracking in their voice like glass. She stood still, frozen in the middle of the hallway. Dust fell like a curtain in front of her face. Cables snapped behind the ceiling panels. The floor shifted beneath her feet. And yet, not one hand reached for hers. They were gone. All of them. She was the translator, the black woman from another continent. Not part of the board. Not part of the plan. Not important. So she stood alone as the earth cracked open beneath her. And still she didn't run. In that world, not everyone was allowed to make mistakes. But Camilla wasn't even allowed to exist. She moved quietly, the way people learn to when their presence is always a little too visible, always one breath too loud, one word too many. Her badge read Camilla D, but no one ever bothered to ask what the D stood for. To most of them, she was just the translator, the local hire, the woman with dark skin and sharp grammar. She had come from South Africa, Johannesburg to be exact, a former French teacher at a private high school, then briefly an interpreter at a refugee center. She'd taken the short-term contract in Myanmar because the pay was better than anything else she'd been offered in 6 months. It was supposed to last 2 weeks. 2 weeks of sitting in air-conditioned rooms, translating corporate jargon for a group of European executives scouting new territory. No one mentioned earthquakes. She was the only black woman in the entire building. During meetings, they placed her at the end of the table, away from the windows, but near the coffee station. No one offered her a seat until she asked. Even then, it was done with a tight, dismissive smile, like handing an umbrella to someone you didn't quite believe deserved to stay dry. "Miss Camilla, could you get us the Burmese engineer again?" someone had said on the second day, not even looking up from his tablet. She nodded, of course. That's what you do. You nod, you smile, you keep your voice soft. Once, when she reached for a croissant before the meeting, the Belgian woman leading the delegation said, "Oh, we didn't know the staff ate with us." The whole room chuckled like she'd made a joke. Camilla forced a laugh too, chewing slowly so she wouldn't say something she'd regret. She was here for the paycheck, not the pride. The building where they held the meetings stood like a skeleton of glass in downtown Yangon, one of those 2 modern towers that felt out of place among the old temples and the street vendors grilling corn by the roadside. It had 32 floors and a view of the river. The team always gathered in one of the glass-walled conference rooms on the 26th floor, just high enough to feel untouchable. That morning, the air had been thick. Monsoon season hadn't officially started, but you could taste the moisture. Even the elevator moved slower, as if sensing something. They began with architectural projections, cost estimates, environmental impact metrics. Camilla translated when spoken to, pausing only when one of the French executives made a rude joke in his native tongue. He assumed she wouldn't catch it. She did. She didn't flinch, but then the conversation shifted. One of the men from Geneva opened a red folder marked Confidential, Tiered Investment Model. That's when they told her she could step out. "We're switching to strategic language," said Mr. Leclerc, without apology. "This part is for internal alignment." Camilla gathered her notepad. "Of course," she said. "Let me know if I'm needed." No one replied. Outside, she stood near the glass elevators, flipping through her notes with mechanical precision. The floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, a blur of concrete and rust and motorcycles weaving like fish through the chaos. The view reminded her of home. Johannesburg, too, had looked beautiful from high places. But the people who built the skyline rarely got to look down from it. As she waited, 2 younger assistants strolled past her, speaking in low tones. One whispered, "Why is she even still here? Doesn't the software translate everything now?" Camilla didn't react. She'd heard worse. Back in the conference room, the conversation turned to equity distribution and risk mitigation. She could hear murmurs through the glass, see the gesturing hands, the men in sharp suits talking over each other, their words lost in a thick barrier of glass and policy. She was not invited back in. The minutes passed. She stayed alert anyway. A translator's habit. She stood like a lighthouse no one needed. Down the hallway, a janitor passed, mopping near the vending machines. He smiled at her. "Too fancy for folks like us up here, huh?" Camilla smiled faintly. "They let me stand in the corner. That's fancy enough." He chuckled and nodded, disappearing back into the service stairwell. She liked him better than anyone in the boardroom. Then something strange happened. The floor beneath her seemed to hum. At first it felt like someone had turned on a generator, a low, vibrating buzz through the soles of her shoes. Then the humming deepened. The water bottles on the table inside the glass room began to tremble. Someone inside the room stood. Another grabbed their briefcase. The glass started to ripple. Not break. Not yet. Just shimmer like water under pressure. And then came the sound, a noise from beneath the earth. Not like thunder. No, this was deeper, raw, like the groan of something ancient splitting in two. One of the men inside opened the door and shouted, "Get to the stairs, now!" Panic erupted like a broken pipe. Chairs scraped. Papers flew. People pushed past her like wind, sharp and invisible. She stepped aside instinctively, flattened herself against the wall, and then she heard it. Someone yelling at her from the end of the hall. "Camilla, don't follow us. No one has time to come back for you." The elevator lights blinked off. The building lurched. Somewhere far below, something heavy collapsed with a roar. She didn't move. She was still holding her notepad, the pages fluttering like frightened birds. As the walls cracked and the floor buckled, she stood there, uninvited, unimportant, unforgettable. Just one woman, invisible in plain sight, and the earth beneath her beginning to open. Not all deaths are fair, and not all lives are given a fair chance to begin with. The floor gave out with a sound like 1,000 bones cracking all at once. Camilla dropped to her knees. The hallway buckled behind her, concrete splitting like paper, the air turning thick with dust and something sharper, something that stung the eyes and scraped the throat. She could no longer hear herself breathe. Somewhere far below, a metal screech tore through the core of the building. The sound of something ancient unraveling. Pipes, steel, the fragile confidence of men who thought money could buy safety. She crawled forward. The emergency lights blinked twice and died. There was no up or down, only crashing sounds, walls tilting, screams that cut off mid-sentence. Her palms skidded over broken glass and warm blood, not hers. She heard the voice again, this time closer, harsher. "Get back! No one needs you here!" It was that German manager, the tall one with the tailored shirts and a voice like cold coffee. She didn't even see his face. Just the flash of his shoes as he pushed past her, barreling toward the staircase that no longer existed. Then, nothing. Silence. Almost sacred, just before the next wave came. A deep growl from below, like the ground itself was swallowing its breath. And then it roared, a full-body scream from the earth, rising through the foundation, rattling her ribs like a child shaking a toy. Camilla was flung sideways. Her head struck something, a wall, maybe a door frame. Everything blurred. When she opened her eyes, the hallway was gone. The floor had split. The corridor behind her caved in. Thick smoke swirled in the air. A metallic burnt smell clung to everything. She was alone. She tried to stand, but the floor tilted again, forcing her back down. Her ears rang. The dust danced in frantic patterns, stirred by the movement of something or someone. And then she heard it, a sound too human to ignore, a low, dragging groan. She turned. Just beyond the cracked glass doors of the conference room, someone moved. Barely. She scrambled over. The doors hung off their hinges. The table had snapped in two. Office chairs lay like broken bones, and beneath a slab of concrete and a tangle of wires, a man struggled to lift his head. Kieran. She hadn't spoken more than "Pannu" once to folks to him before today. Young, mixed race, American accent. Always polite in that distant way executives are polite to staff who don't matter. Now he looked nothing like a CEO. His shirt was torn, blood trickled from his temple, painting a line down the side of his face. His voice rasped. I tried to go back. They don't talk, she said, her own voice trembling. Save your strength. One of his legs was pinned under a support beam. She pressed her hand against it. It was hot. Swollen. The skin already turning dark. She looked around. Nothing moved. No footsteps. No voices calling names. No rescue crews. Only the soft creaking of a building still trying to decide whether it would stand or fall. She found a thick piece of rebar wedged between a filing cabinet and the wall. She used it to pry at the concrete, groaning with the effort. Her hands blistered. The metal seared her palms. But slowly, inch by inch, she lifted the slab just enough to slide Kieran free. He screamed, his leg bent at an angle that made her stomach churn. She didn't flinch. Not now. Not when his life depended on her not falling apart. "Can you move your toes?" she asked, tearing a strip from her shirt and tying it around his thigh. Tight. Crude. But better than nothing. He nodded weakly. "I think so. Can't feel much, though." She half dragged, half carried him toward a corner of the room that hadn't collapsed yet. The ceiling above them was cracked, but holding, for now. One large glass panel had fallen sideways, leaning against the wall like a makeshift roof. Behind it was a narrow wedge of space, barely enough to fit two bodies. She helped him crawl behind the glass, then followed, pushing in sideways. "We're trapped," he whispered. "Not yet," she said, brushing debris from his shoulder. "Not while we're still breathing." He laughed, short, hollow. "I guess you're the last person I expected to be stuck with." "Likewise," she said, leaning back against the cold wall. "But I suppose we'll have to make do." Then the aftershock hit, a deeper, longer rumble. The walls screamed as they shifted. A concrete beam crashed down just feet from where they were hiding. Dust exploded into their lungs. Camilla threw her arm over Kieran's head. It passed. But now the hallway behind them was completely sealed, all exits buried. Kieran was silent. Camilla reached over, felt his wrist. His pulse fluttered like a scared bird. She leaned close and whispered, "You're still here. You hear me?" He blinked slowly. "Yeah, still here." The building groaned one last time, then settled. For now. Outside, the city was chaos. Inside, under cracked glass and fallen steel, two strangers breathed the same dusty air. In the dark, race and status didn't matter, but pain still did. And Camilla, once told no one needed her, had just saved the only life still left in that room. There was no light, no water. No one up there who still believed anyone down here was alive. Just breath. Two uneven patterns rattling softly in the dark. It took Camilla a while to realize that the thick smell wasn't just dust and concrete. There was something else. Faintly metallic. Sour. Blood. Infection. Kieran had stopped moaning. That worried her more than the moaning. She reached for the little disposable lighter in her bag. Bright green. The kind she always kept for lighting candles during power cuts at home. She flicked it once. Twice. The flame hissed to life, small but alive, just like them. She leaned in and held the light close to Kieran's leg. Her throat tightened. The swelling had gotten worse. The skin purple around the gash, wet. and slick. Around the edges, she could already see the telltale signs of infection, the puffed tissue, the slight oozing, the heat. "Shit," she whispered. "This is bad." He blinked slowly. "You just figuring that out now? Stop trying to be funny. It's not working. I guess I'm better at boardrooms." She gave him a look. "Well, this ain't one." He groaned and turned his face toward the wall. She knew that kind of silence, the silence of pain that didn't want company. Camilla sat back on her heels and thought. Her dress. She wore a cotton dress that morning, navy blue with faded stitching. Not made for rescue work. Still, it would do. She tore at the hem with her teeth, then ripped until she had a strip long enough to wrap. Carefully, she pressed the cloth against the wound, tightening it just above the worst swelling. He hissed through his teeth. "Try not to scream," she said. "Sound bounces down here." "Thanks for the heads up," he muttered, biting his lip. The flame flickered. She let it die. Darkness fell like a blanket again. Kieran spoke after a long while. "Why did you come back?" "What?" "When the building started coming down, everyone ran. You could have gotten out." She laughed, soft, bitter. "Do you really think they'd have waited for me?" He didn't answer. She adjusted herself against the broken wall, knees to her chest. "My father died in a fire," she said, voice low, almost to herself. "Warehouse accident. No alarms, no exits. They said they didn't know anyone was still inside." Kieran shifted slightly. "He was left behind?" She nodded, eyes fixed on nothing. "He was a janitor, third shift. They called it a tragic oversight." As if that meant anything, like someone's life could just slip their mind. "I'm sorry," she swallowed hard. He used to say, "Camille, always walk your own way out of the room. Don't expect the door to stay open for you." He didn't make it out, and I never forgot. Kieran was quiet for a moment. Then, "So you came back for me because no one deserves to be left under rubble, bleeding alone. Not even a spoiled CEO from Seattle." He smirked. "Harsh. Accurate." More silence, this one softer. From somewhere behind the cracked slab, a trickle. Not loud, just a faint, steady dripping. Camilla stilled. She crawled across the uneven floor, using both hands to feel her way forward. The sound grew louder. A narrow crack along the wall, no wider than a pinky. Cold moisture wet her fingertips. She pressed her face close. Yes, water. It tasted metallic, full of dust. But it was water. And it was moving, not stagnant, which meant it might be part of a larger groundwater stream. A miracle, in a way. She cupped her hands and brought a small pool back to Kieran. "It's not Fiji, but it'll keep your mouth from drying out." He sipped, then drank again. "God, that's incredible." "I know. Don't drink too much," he said, trying to sit up. "You need it more than me." She tilted her head. "Wow, look at that. The CEO does have a heart." He chuckled, then winced. "Don't make me laugh. It hurts too much." She lay beside him, her shoulder against his. Neither of them spoke for a while. Their bodies adjusted to the cold, to the ache, to the reality of being buried beneath a building in a city far from either of their homes. "Camilla," he said quietly. "Yeah? You think they'll come?" She didn't answer right away. She listened to the water, the air, the creaks, everything alive somehow, except the people who should have been screaming their names from above. Finally, she said, "If they do, it won't be for us. It'll be because someone up there wants to look like a hero on the news." He nodded slowly. "That's honest." "Yeah, it is." She reached for the lighter again. Lit it. Just for a moment. Enough to see his face pale and tight with pain. Her own reflection flickered in his pupils. "You're not gonna die down here," she said like a promise. "Not on my watch." And she meant it, because down here, under all this steel and dirt, no one could pretend she didn't matter. No one could unsee her. No one could laugh her off as the help. Down here, she was all there was. And she wasn't leaving anyone behind. Some wounds don't bleed. They rot slowly, from the inside out. Like the way the world treats a black woman when she's not useful anymore, or never was. By the third night, the cold had crept in. Not a biting cold, but something worse. Slow, damp, crawling through bone. The kind of chill that made your body curl in on itself without realizing. Camilla hadn't spoken in a while. She was curled beside Kiran, her face turned to the wall, breathing shallow, uneven. Her arms tucked tight around her chest like she was trying to hold herself together. He nudged her gently with his elbow. "Hey, you still with me?" She stirred, just barely. "Yeah, you're shaking." "It's nothing. It's not nothing." She tried to sit up, but her arms trembled and she gave up halfway. Her head lolled forward. "Just tired." "You've been keeping me alive for 3 days. You should be tired." He reached for his jacket, the one part of his suit that hadn't torn, and shrugged it off with a grunt of pain. "Here." She looked up, half dazed. "No, you'll freeze." "I'll manage." She didn't argue after that. Just wrapped the coat around herself, hands trembling too hard to fasten the zipper. He helped her with that part, fumbling clumsily, both of them laughing under their breath at the struggle. The sound came out dry, cracked, like something trying to remember how to be human. Once the coat was on, she exhaled, then leaned back against the slab. There was a silence between them. Not awkward, just heavy. The kind that hangs after people stop pretending. Then Kiran said quietly, "Can I ask something? Only if it's not about how to get out of here. I'm fresh out of ideas." He smiled. "No, I was wondering, what did you do before this? Before Myanmar?" She blinked slowly, eyes adjusting again to the dark. Then, after a pause, "I was a teacher." "Really?" "High school French, Johannesburg, 4 years." "What happened?" She sighed. "Budget cuts. That's what they said anyway. But I was pushing for equal pay. Turns out school boards don't like black women asking why the white teachers make more for the same damn job." His face softened. "That's awful." "That's life," she said, voice flat. "I went into translation after that. It was supposed to be temporary. Then temporary became permanent. Funny how that happens." "Not funny," he said. "No," she agreed. "Not really." Another pause. Then he added, like something half-buried, "My mom, she was a teacher too. Chemistry. Detroit Public Schools." Camilla turned slightly toward him. "Was?" "She passed a few years back. Heart attack. But before that, she went through hell." He shifted, his breath catching at the movement. "My dad's white. Rich. His company started in logistics, then went international. He always made sure we looked good, polished. Press appearances, gala dinners, that kind of thing. And your mom? She was never comfortable with that world. And they weren't comfortable with her either." He smiled bitterly. "I'll never forget this one night. We were at this fundraiser, you know. Glass ceilings, valet parking, the whole scene. Some waiter walked right past her with the champagne tray and said, 'The staff needs to wait outside, ma'am.' She was wearing pearls, real ones." "What did she do?" She smiled, said, "Oh, don't worry, I brought my own glass." Then she walked straight over to the mayor's table and sat down like she owned the place. Camilla laughed, quiet but real. "She sounds like she was something else." She was. "She taught me how to make people uncomfortable without raising my voice. It's a real skill." Camilla nodded. "It is." They were quiet again, the air around them growing colder. Somewhere behind the wall, another piece of debris shifted, but neither of them flinched anymore. The fear had changed shape. It wasn't about falling ceilings or cracked concrete now. It was about whether anyone up there had stopped looking. Kiran looked at her through the dark. "Can I tell you something?" "Sure." "When I first saw you in that meeting, I thought, she doesn't belong here. Not because you didn't have the skills. You clearly did. Just, no one ever looks like you in those rooms. Camilla tilted her head. That's not news to me. I know, I'm just saying. I didn't think much of it. Until now. And now, I feel ashamed of that. She didn't respond right away. Then she said softly, You know what hurts the most? It's not when people say it. It's when they don't have to. When you just feel it in the room. He reached for her hand. His fingers were cold. Hers were colder. I see you now, he said. Do you? Yes, and I'm sorry I didn't sooner. They stayed like that. Two strangers huddled in the dark, nothing left to hide behind. No titles, no glass walls, just the quiet rhythm of their breath, side by side. Camilla leaned her head gently on his shoulder, eyes wide open in the black. Somewhere above them, the world went on, but down here, in the belly of the earth, something had shifted. And not all wounds would go unseen anymore. No one fights harder than the person who's already been left behind once. By the fourth day, the dust had thickened in the air like fog, clinging to their tongues and eyelashes, choking every breath. The darkness felt heavier. Time, too. Camilla had stopped trying to keep track of hours. There was no rhythm anymore, just heartbeats and moments between small sounds. A drip, a shift in the wall, a ragged cough. Kieran's fever had crept higher. His voice grew hoarser, his skin hotter. He drifted in and out, mumbling things she couldn't always make out. Half names, half prayers. Camilla sat beside him, hand resting on his chest to feel the rise and fall, the only proof he was still here. Then, something shifted in her. She stood up. It wasn't a grand gesture, not the kind people write into rescue stories. There was no music, no burst of courage, just her body moving because her soul wouldn't let her stay still. She picked up the twisted strip of steel she'd pried loose earlier, a jagged piece of something once part of the ceiling. Heavy, awkward, but sharper at the end than her bare hands. She gripped it like a shovel. Hang in there, she whispered to Kieran. I'm not just going to sit and wait to die. The air was cold, her palms raw, but she started digging anyway, slow, careful, not in some grand upward tunnel like the movies, but sideways, toward a faint shimmer she'd seen earlier. A sliver of light. It was tiny, like someone had poked a needle through the wall of the world. But it was there. She crawled toward it, dragging the metal beside her. The space was barely wide enough for her to lie flat. Her back scraped the ceiling. Her knees bruised against the floor. But she didn't stop. Each movement felt like a decision. She scooped, pulled, pressed her ear to the concrete now and then, listening for voices, sirens, anything. Nothing came. She lost count of how long she dug. Her throat burned. Her fingers bled through the bandage she'd made 2 days ago. Still, she kept going, because the silence had taught her something. No one was coming for her. Not unless she made it impossible to be ignored. Behind her, Kieran stirred. She turned back. He was sweating hard, teeth chattering now. I'm cold, he muttered, eyes half-lidded. Why is it so cold? She scrambled back to him, pressed her hand to his forehead. Burning. His body was burning, but he felt cold inside. His breath hitched. Is this what it feels like? She didn't ask what he meant. She just sat down and pulled him close. Hey, she said softly. Remember what you told me? Your mom? How she never raised her voice? He didn't respond. She sounds like someone who didn't just survive but lived. His eyes fluttered. She kept talking. My mom used to sing to me. When the power was out, when the rain got too loud, or when my father didn't come home. Camilla took a breath, closed her eyes, and sang. It wasn't a song made for beauty. It was old, scratched with memory. A lullaby she hadn't heard out loud since she was 9. In Zulu. Her voice cracked, raw from thirst, but it carried. Kieran stirred again, a little more alert. You're singing, he said. Yeah. Why? Because I need you to remember this world is still out there, even if we can't see it. He tried to smile. You sing like my mom used to, off key. She laughed softly. I'll take that as a compliment. She hummed a little more, then told him a story about her first teaching job. The student who forged a permission slip just to get out of French class. How she caught him by translating the note back to English and calling his bluff. Kieran chuckled faintly. That's evil. No, she said, brushing hair from his forehead. That's teaching. She told him how she'd once been so broke. She taught 3 classes and worked nights translating for tourists at a hotel desk. How no matter how hard she worked, there was always someone asking, do you really think you're qualified? He blinked. You are. She didn't answer that. Just said, I fought to be in those rooms, and even when they pushed me out, I fought again. Then she added, almost like a promise, if someone finds me, if they find us, I want them to know I didn't stay quiet. Kieran opened his mouth, tried to say something, gave up, just squeezed her hand instead. The night went on. The air stilled. She didn't sleep. Couldn't. She sat beside him holding his hand, humming broken melodies into the dark, because sometimes the only way to survive is to believe, without proof, that you're still worth saving. The light didn't come like a burst or a blaze. It came slow, a pulse, faint, almost imagined. Camilla was crouched beside Kieran, her eyes half closed, her breath shallow from dust and exhaustion when she saw it. Just a flicker. Not sun, not fire. Something colder, bluer, artificial. She blinked hard, thought maybe she was dreaming. Then she heard it. Faint metal clanking, like boots on hollow steel. A voice, too far to understand, but human. She sat up fast, dizzy from the motion. Kieran, she whispered, shaking his shoulder. Kieran, someone's here. He groaned. His lips were dry, skin flushed red with fever. She turned toward the tunnel she'd been digging, her small path of hope, scratched out with metal and stubbornness. The light shimmered again, a pale arc sweeping left to right, left to right. A searchlight. Her chest tightened. She scrambled back through the narrow space, half crawling, half dragging herself toward the hole she'd widened each night like a ritual. This time, she didn't care how sharp the debris was. Her arms were bleeding, but she pushed through. Hey! She screamed. We're here! No response. She screamed again. Her voice broke. She grabbed the rebar and started banging it against the concrete wall, rhythmically, loudly, again and again. Bang, bang, bang! She heard shouting. Clearer now. 2, maybe 3 voices. One closer. Do it again. Sounded like it came from Sector 4. She banged harder, tears mixing with the dirt on her cheeks. This way! Someone yelled. Thermal says 2 signatures, alive! Her knees gave out. She collapsed on her side, laughing and crying at the same time. Then came the sound she hadn't let herself hope for. Drilling. Actual drilling. Minutes blurred. Voices grew louder. Concrete shifted, then cracked, then broke. And suddenly there was space. Real air, real sky. A hand reached down through the opening. Hold on, we've got you! She crawled forward, pushing herself into the light. Arms reached for her. Gloves, helmets, masks. The faces of men who'd been told to search one last time before calling it. They lifted her gently, like something sacred. She turned back. There's someone else, down there. 2 rescuers climbed in with a stretcher. More voices shouted orders. A paramedic crouched beside her, flashlight blinding. Can you breathe? She nodded. Name? Camilla. He jotted something down on his pad. You're lucky to be alive. No, she rasped. We're lucky he was alive too. Minutes later they carried Kieran out. His face was gray, mouth slack, but his chest rose, still breathing. As they laid him beside her, she reached for his hand. It was warm, his eyes cracked open. Told you, he murmured. barely audible. "We weren't dying down there." She smiled. "Guess you were right for once." Then came the noise. More people. Boots, radios, click-click of cameras. The media had arrived. They were lined up outside the makeshift zone. Dozens of them, lenses raised, voices sharp and excited like vultures catching scent. The first photo was taken before she even stood upright. They wrapped her in a gray blanket. One size fits all. Kiran got the same treatment. They sat side by side on the curb, sirens wailing behind them. A reporter rushed over. "Kieran Ellis, Ellis Corp CEO, just rescued after 6 days under rubble." "Mr. Ellis, what was it like down there?" Kieran looked dazed. His eyes scanned the crowd, then settled on Camilla. She started to pull away, used to being overlooked even when she was the only reason someone made it through. But he grabbed her hand, pulled her forward. "I'm not the story," he said. His voice cracked. "She is." The reporter blinked. "Excuse me?" Kieran looked directly at the cameras now, voice steadier. "I'm alive because of this woman. Camilla saved my life. She kept me awake, fed me, bandaged my wounds, dug until she bled. If you're writing anything today, write that." The crowd quieted. Somewhere a shutter clicked. The lenses moved. One by one they turned, finally, to her. But Camilla wasn't smiling. Her face was streaked with mud, eyes hollow with exhaustion. She didn't raise a fist, didn't wave. She just stood, taller than she ever had before. And the light, real light this time, framed her like truth always should. There are names that people only say with indifference, or worse, with that slight edge of dismissal, as if the syllables themselves were inconvenient. Then there are names that, one day, make people stop and listen. Camilla had never heard her name said as many times as she did that week. But it wasn't always said the way she imagined it should be. Some newscasters still tripped over the syllables. Some softened the vowels to sound more exotic, like they were saying the name of a storm. Others avoided it altogether, but the cameras didn't. They caught her face, exhausted, bruised, barely standing next to Kiran outside that field hospital in Yangon, and broadcast it on every major network. People called her brave, resilient, an unsung hero. But mostly, they called her the translator. Few knew anything more. For the first few days after the rescue, she tried to disappear. It wasn't hard. The attention was for him. She stayed in a small recovery wing on the other side of the city, away from the press, the questions, the microphones that waited outside like wolves. Kieran, however, stayed very still. He refused every interview, skipped every requested appearance, sent formal regrets to every press conference lined up in his name. "No, I don't want to talk to People magazine," he said flatly to his publicist over the phone. "And no, I don't want to host a recovery gala. That's disgusting." His publicist sighed. "You've got the world's sympathy, Kieran. You could do anything right now." He looked out the hospital window. That's exactly the point. 2 days later, he called Camilla. She almost didn't pick up. "Hey," he said, voice softer than she remembered. "I need you to be somewhere." "I've been somewhere," she said. "Under a building. With you." He laughed. "Fair. But this is different." He sent a car. She didn't want it, but it showed up anyway. The place was a small hall. Nothing extravagant. No banners. No press tables. Just a podium and a few rows of chairs. Maybe 50 people. Mostly quiet. Mostly watching. Kieran stood up front, still pale, still recovering, but steady on his feet. "I didn't want this to be a spectacle," he began. "That's not what this is." Camilla stood off to the side, hands folded, unsure if she was even supposed to be in the room. "I survived 6 days under concrete," he continued. "But I didn't survive on my own. I didn't keep myself alive. I didn't find water. I didn't stop the bleeding. I didn't keep hope alive." He looked at her then, not briefly, not politely, but fully. publicly, as if seeing someone for the first time and refusing to look away. She did. Camilla did. A beat. Silence in the room. He stepped back and motioned to a screen behind him. A logo appeared. A simple white circle inside it. A silhouette of a woman kneeling beside another, both figures in motion, one reaching toward the other's outstretched hand. The Camilla Foundation, he said, an international fund to support women of color, particularly in regions facing climate disaster, poverty, or social displacement. Women like Camilla, who are too often overlooked, underpaid, and forgotten until they're needed. Camilla's heart beat so loudly she thought others might hear it. Kieran stepped away from the mic. She was supposed to smile, say thank you, maybe cry a little. Instead, she walked up to him and said, under her breath, "You didn't have to name it after me." "I know," he said. "That's why it mattered." She turned to the crowd, many of them already standing, applauding. And still, she didn't take the mic. Didn't wave or bow or smile the way the camera wanted. She just spoke clearly into the quiet. "I don't want a title," she said. "I don't want a seat at the table just because it's polite." A pause. "But I'll work. I'll go where no one else does. I'll listen to women no one sees. I've done it before. I'll keep doing it." Somewhere in the back, someone wiped their eyes. She stepped down, walked past the rows of polished shoes and folded arms, out into the sunlight that cut across the marble floor. No spotlights followed, but her name did. And now people didn't just say it. They remembered it. You can bury a woman in rubble. You can silence her in boardrooms, push her to the edge of conversations, strip her name from the credits. But what you can't do, what the world always forgets, is stop the sound of justice once it learns how to speak. Camilla didn't go back to Johannesburg. Not right away. She wasn't running from anything. She just had work to do. She moved with purpose now. Not through corporate hallways or marble lobbies, but through tents pitched in the heat, fields flattened by floods, schoolhouses with no walls. Myanmar, Laos, Bangladesh, then Haiti. Each time she showed up quietly. No cameras, no title. Just a satchel with bandages, water tablets, a laminated chart of medical terms in 5 languages, and the same broken-in walking boots she'd worn when the tower fell. She taught women how to check pulses, how to set a broken arm, how to whisper calm into the ears of someone bleeding. She read with children in corners lit by solar lamps, tracing letters on the palms of their hands. She translated for trauma surgeons, for midwives, for engineers trying to rebuild what the storms kept tearing down. And everywhere she went, people started saying her name, not with pity, not with confusion, but with respect. A quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need applause. One morning in Port-au-Prince, after another long night organizing triage supply kits, she stepped outside the tent to catch the sunrise. The city was stirring. Roosters, dust, the first radio voices of the day humming from makeshift speakers. A girl about 10 or 11 came up to her, barefoot, hair braided into uneven rows. She had a notebook tucked under one arm and a plastic cup of water in the other. "You're Camilla?" the girl asked. Camilla smiled. "Depends who's asking. My teacher said you used to be in a big building that fell down." "That's true." "You were trapped?" "I was." The girl's eyes narrowed. "Were you scared?" Camilla thought for a moment. "Yes, but fear doesn't mean you stop trying." The girl sipped from her cup, staring hard. Then, in a whisper, "Are you scared someone might leave you again?" Camilla paused. Her hand rested lightly on the girl's shoulder. "No," she said gently. "Not anymore. The world knows I'm here now." And it did. The Camilla Foundation grew in quiet, steady circles. Not flashy, not like the big-name charities with glossy brochures. But its impact ran deep. Microloans for women-owned disaster relief shops, mobile clinics staffed entirely by women of color, education grants for girls who'd lost homes, families, or names. Camilla never became a celebrity. She never tried. What mattered was that she wasn't invisible anymore. Not to those who mattered. Not to those who'd once been told, in 100 different ways, that their stories weren't worth listening to. She kept a notebook now, worn, its corners bent, every page filled with names, not of donors, not of executives, but of women she'd met in shelters, tents, makeshift classrooms. Amina, who taught her how to purify river water using banana ash. Leonie, who carried her baby through 4 countries and still translated 5 languages at a border crossing. Teresa, who refused to evacuate until every elder in her village had a ride. Camilla didn't collect names to be remembered. She carried them to remind herself that silence was never an option again. Late one evening, she sat by a fire, translating a list of symptoms for a French-speaking nurse in Haiti, when Karen called. His voice came through the line like it always did, hesitant, thoughtful, a little tired. "You still working? I'm not sure you can call it that. I saw the new mobile center in Kerala, that's you, right? The foundation, not me." He paused. "You know, I think about those days sometimes. So do I." There was another pause. Then he said, "You ever feel like people only listen now because you were nearly buried?" She didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "I think they listen because I refused to stay buried." The wind shifted outside the tent. A low hum of crickets filled the silence. After they hung up, she closed her notebook and sat quietly for a long time. The world wasn't fixed. It never would be. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't trying to make it listen. It already was. And Camilla, once told she wasn't needed, wasn't worth turning back for, was no longer a name they could pass over. She had become a sound the world couldn't unhear. You can leave a person behind. You can abandon her in a boardroom, in a crisis, beneath rubble and bureaucracy. You can ignore her voice, her name, her hands reaching out for something more than survival. You can pretend she doesn't matter. But what you can't leave behind, what you can never bury, is her dignity. Camilla didn't ask to be seen. She didn't beg to be rescued. She didn't demand the spotlight. She simply refused to disappear. And in doing so, she became something more than a name, whispered in passing. She became a voice that lingers, a reminder that justice doesn't always wear a suit, or speak perfect English, or sit at the center of the room. Sometimes it's dressed in dust, bleeding at the knuckles, and still digging. So share her story, speak her name, because somewhere, right now, someone is still being left behind, simply because of the color of her skin. And the world needs to know she is still here. She always was. We'll see you again in our next story, where another quiet moment might hold a powerful lesson. If this one moved you, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next truth waiting to be told.